Lee Dae-ho stood at the bridge of the starship Soul's Pride, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the stars drift past the main view screen. At 24 years old, he was the youngest captain in the history of the Galactic Coalition fleet. The weight of that title pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy coat. "Captain," came a voice from behind him. Dae-ho turned to see Commander Kim So-young approaching with a data pad in her hands. So-young was 10 years older than him, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been his mentor at the academy, and now served as his first officer. "What is it, Commander?" Dae-ho asked. "The crew reports are in," So-young said, handing him the pad. "Most of the alien officers are questioning your appointment." Dae-ho nodded slowly. He had expected this. The Coalition fleet was made up mostly of aliens, the tall, graceful Alterians, with their blue skin and silver eyes, the massive warrior, race called the Krogoth, and the machine-like Nexari who spoke in electronic clicks and beeps. Humans made up less than 5% of the fleet. "What about our human crew?" Dae-ho asked. "They believe in you," So-young replied. "Lieutenant Choi Hyun-woo has been telling everyone about your academy scores, and Dr. Yoon Ji-hai says she's excited to serve under the youngest captain in fleet history." Dae-ho smiled slightly. Hyun-woo was barely 22, fresh from the academy with bright eyes and endless energy. Dr. Yoon was different, a quiet woman in her 30s who knew more about alien biology than most aliens knew about themselves. The bridge doors opened with a soft hiss. Fleet Admiral Park Min-soo walked in, his gray uniform perfectly pressed. Park was in his 60s with silver hair and a face that had seen too many battles. He had been the one to recommend Dae-ho for captain. "Admiral," Dae-ho said, standing straighter. "At ease, Captain," Park said. "How are you settling in?" "Fine, sir. The crew is adjusting." Park nodded knowingly. "They'll come around. Your test scores don't lie, Dae-ho. You see patterns others miss. That's why you're here." Before Dae-ho could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Lieutenant Choi Hyun-woo spun around at his tactical station, his face pale. "Captain, unknown ships approaching fast from the asteroid field." Dae-ho moved to the captain's chair. On screen. The view screen changed to show 3 dark ships unlike anything in the Coalition database. They were sleek and black with surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. No running lights, no identification markers. "Sir," Hyun-woo said, his voice tight. "Their weapons are charging." "Red alert," Dae-ho ordered. "All hands to battle stations." The ship shuddered as red lights bathed the bridge. So-young took her position next to him while Admiral Park moved to the rear command station. "Incoming transmission," reported the communications officer, a blue-skinned Alterian named Vel. "On speakers," Dae-ho said. A voice filled the bridge, not quite mechanical but not entirely organic either. "Coalition vessel, you will submit to scanning and boarding. Resistance is futile. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our collective." So-young leaned close to Dae-ho. "Captain, those ships, they match descriptions from the old archives. The Void Collective." Dae-ho felt his blood run cold. Every academy student learned about the Void Collective. Ancient machines that had nearly destroyed the galaxy 10,000 years ago before mysteriously disappearing. "They're supposed to be extinct," he whispered. "Apparently not," Admiral Park said grimly. The enemy ships opened fire. Bright energy beams lanced through space, striking the Soul's Pride's shields. The ship rocked violently, throwing crew members against their stations. "Shields down to 60%, Hyun-woo reported. "Return fire," Dae-ho ordered. The ship's weapons fired back, but the enemy vessels seemed to absorb the energy blasts without damage. Their dark hulls rippled and adapted. "No effect, sir," Hyun-woo said in disbelief. Another barrage struck them. The lights flickered, and Dae-ho could smell smoke in the air. "Shields down to 30%, So-young reported. "At this rate, we have maybe 2 minutes before hull breach." Dae-ho closed his eyes and thought. In the academy, he had studied every famous battle in human history. His professors said he was obsessed with old Earth naval warfare, but now that knowledge sparked an idea. "Hyun-woo, Can you overload our forward torpedo tubes? Sir? The young lieutenant looked confused. Overload them. Make them explode outward, instead of firing normally. That would damage our own ship, Captain, So Young warned. I know, Deho said. All power to engines. Emergency acceleration, straight at the lead enemy ship. The bridge crew stared at him in shock. Admiral Park stepped forward. Captain, are you planning to ram them? Not exactly, Deho said. Trust me. The Soul's Pride surged forward at maximum speed, heading directly for the largest enemy vessel. The Void Collective ship seemed surprised by this suicidal move and adjusted their formation. Now, Deho shouted. Detonate the torpedo tubes and emergency reverse thrust. Hyunwoo's fingers flew over his controls. The forward section of the ship exploded in a controlled blast, sending debris and energy washing over the enemy vessel. At the same moment, the ship's engines reversed, throwing everyone forward as they decelerated hard. The enemy ship's adaptive hull tried to absorb the explosion, but the debris created a chaotic energy pattern it couldn't process. For a few seconds, its shields flickered and failed. Fire everything we have at that ship now, Deho ordered. Every weapon on the Soul's Pride fired at once. Without its shields, the enemy vessel took massive damage. Its hull cracked and atmosphere vented into space. It's working, Hyunwoo yelled, but the other two ships were moving to attack. Deho knew they had only moments. All hands, abandon ship procedures, he ordered calmly. Launch all escape pods, toward the asteroid field, random scatter pattern. Sir? So Young looked at him in confusion. We're abandoning ship, Deho explained. But we're not giving up. The crew worked quickly to evacuate. As the escape pods launched in different directions, Deho stayed on the bridge with a skeleton crew. Captain, Admiral Park said. What? Are you planning? Deho smiled grimly. Something no sane person would try. He programmed the ship's navigation computer with a complex pattern, one based on an ancient human naval tactic called crossing the T. The damaged ship began to move in an erratic pattern, drawing the two remaining enemy vessels after it. Jump to hyperspace, Deho ordered. Emergency jump, random coordinates. Sir, we can't jump this close to the asteroid field, the navigator protested. The gravity will tear us apart. That's the idea, Deho said. The Soul's Pride engaged its hyperspace drive while still too close to the asteroids. The ship was instantly torn apart by conflicting gravitational forces, but the hyperspace rupture it created was massive and unstable. The two pursuing enemy ships were caught in the rupture. Their adaptive hulls couldn't cope with the chaotic hyperspace energies. One ship was completely destroyed, while the other was badly damaged and limping away. Hours later, Coalition rescue ships found the escape pods scattered throughout the asteroid field. Deho and his surviving crew were taken back to Coalition Command, where they were met by dozens of intelligence officers eager to hear their report. In the debriefing room, Admiral Park looked at Deho with a mixture of pride and concern. Captain, you just confirmed our worst fears, Park said. The Void Collective has returned, and from what you've told us, our standard tactics are useless against them. Yes, sir, Deho replied. But they're not invincible. Their adaptation systems have limits. They can be confused by chaos and unexpected moves. Chaos, Park repeated thoughtfully. You mean human tactics? Deho nodded. Every other species in the coalition fights in organized formations with predictable patterns. Humans learn to fight differently. We learn to survive against impossible odds by being unpredictable. So, Young leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Captain? I'm suggesting that maybe being the youngest captain in fleet history isn't enough, Deho said quietly. Maybe we need to teach the galaxy how to fight like humans. Admiral Park was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. Captain Lee Deho, how would you like to command your own task force? Deho looked around the room at the faces of his crew, So Young with her steady confidence, Hyunwoo with his eager determination, Dr. Yoon with her quiet intelligence. They had followed him into an impossible situation and survived. I would be honored, sir, he said. Outside the debriefing room windows, The stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that the galaxy's youngest captain had just taken the first step toward becoming its greatest hope. The Coalition Command Center buzzed with activity as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Captain Lee Dae-ho stood before a massive holographic display showing the current tactical situation. Red markers indicated Void Collective attacks, and there were far too many of them. Admiral Park Min-soo approached with a grim expression. Behind him walked Commander Bae Tae-jun, his aide, carrying a stack of datapads. "Captain, the situation is worse than we thought," Park said quietly. "In the past week, we've lost contact with 17 fleet units. That's over 50 ships and nearly 20,000 personnel." Dae-ho studied the display. The Void Collective. Attacks followed a pattern. They struck quickly, overwhelmed defenses, then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Each attack seemed more coordinated than the last. "What about survivors?" Dae-ho asked. Commander Bae stepped forward. "Very few, sir. The enemy seems to be harvesting crew members along with ship technology." The word harvesting sent a chill through everyone present. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai, who had been analyzing enemy ship debris, looked up from her research station. "Captain, I've been studying the fragments from your encounter," she said. "The enemy ships are not just machines. They're partially organic. The metal adapts like living tissue." Before Dae-ho could respond, the command center's main doors opened. A procession of alien military leaders entered, the elite of Coalition Command. Leading them was High Admiral Veltar of the Alterians, her silver hair braided with symbols of rank. Behind her came War Chief Krog of the Krogoth, a massive figure covered in ritual scars, and Nexus Prime 001 of the Nexari, its mechanical body clicking as it moved. "Admiral Park," High Admiral Veltar said in her melodic Alterian accent, "We have reviewed your report about this human captain's encounter with the Void Collective." Dae-ho felt the weight of their attention. These beings had been fighting wars when humanity was still learning to make fire. War Chief Krog spoke in his deep, rumbling voice. "The enemy you describe matches ancient records. 10,000 years ago, they nearly consumed all life in this galaxy." Nexus Prime 001's electronic voice added, "Our calculations show current coalition tactics have a 0.3% probability of success against Void Collective forces." "Then what do you suggest?" Admiral Park asked. High Admiral Veltar gestured to the holographic display. "Full evacuation of threatened sectors. We establish defensive lines around core worlds and hope they lose interest." "Hope?" Dae-ho couldn't help himself. "With respect, Admiral, hope is not a strategy." The room fell silent. Commander Kim So-young stepped closer to Dae-ho, a subtle show of support. War Chief Krog's eyes narrowed. "Young human, you speak of strategy to beings who have fought wars for millennia. What could your brief species possibly teach us?" Dae-ho took a deep breath. He knew this moment would define everything that came next. "You're right," he said. "Humans haven't been fighting as long as other species, but maybe that's exactly why we can see solutions you can't." He moved to the holographic controls and began manipulating the display. Every species in the coalition fights the same way. Organized formations, predictable tactics, honor-bound rules of engagement. The Void Collective has had 10,000 years to study and adapt to those methods. The display changed to show human historical battles, ancient naval warfare, guerrilla campaigns, asymmetric conflicts. Humans learned to fight differently because we had to, Dae-ho continued. We were always outnumbered, outgunned, facing enemies with better technology. So we learned to be unpredictable. We learned that sometimes the only way to win is to break the rules. Lieutenant Choi Hyun-woo stepped forward from his position at a monitoring station. "Sir, if I may add, human military history shows that innovation often comes from desperation. When conventional tactics fail, we try impossible things." High Admiral Veltar's expression remained skeptical. "Give us an example, Captain." Dae-ho highlighted a section of the tactical display. The Battle of Trafalgar. Admiral Nelson deliberately broke the line of enemy ships, a move that should have been suicide. But it worked because the enemy couldn't adapt fast enough to chaos. Ancient history, War Chief Krog rumbled dismissively. Is it? Deho asked. When I faced the Void Collective, I used similar principles. Controlled chaos, unpredictable, movements making my own ship a weapon they couldn't analyze fast enough. It worked. Nexus Prime 001 processed this for several seconds. One victory does not constitute a viable strategy, human captain. Commander Bay cleared his throat. Actually, sir, I ran some simulations based on Captain Lee's encounter. He activated his datapad, and new information appeared on the main display. Using traditional coalition tactics against known Void Collective capabilities, our survival rate is 0.7%, Bay continued. However, when I factored in unpredictable human-style tactics, random attack patterns, sacrificial maneuvers, asymmetric warfare, the survival rate increased to 23%. The alien commanders were quiet, studying the numbers. 23% is still very low odds, High Admiral Veltar pointed out. But it's better than zero, Admiral Park said firmly. And it's the only new idea anyone has presented. Doctor, Yoon looked up from her research again. There's something else. The enemy adaptation system I've been studying. It works by analyzing patterns and predicting responses. But human neural patterns are different, more chaotic, harder to predict. War Chief Krog crossed his massive arms. You are suggesting we abandon military discipline and fight like barbarians? I'm suggesting we fight like humans, Deho said quietly, and that maybe being called barbarians is better than being extinct. The room fell silent again. High Admiral Veltar walked closer to the tactical display, studying the human battle examples. These tactics you show, she said slowly, they require soldiers willing to die for strangers, willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. Yes, Deho replied. And you believe humans can do this? Deho looked around the room at his crew. So? Young met his eyes with a slight nod. Hyunwoo stood straighter, ready for whatever came next. Dr. Yoon continued her work, but he could see her listening intently. I know they can, he said. Nexus Prime 001 spoke up. This proposal requires testing. We cannot risk the entire coalition, fleet on untested theories. Admiral Park stepped forward. Which is why Captain Lee will be given command of a volunteer task force. Ships and crews willing to try these new tactics. Volunteers? War Chief Krog sounded surprised. Yes, Park said. No one will be ordered to follow human tactics, but anyone willing to volunteer will have the chance to fight back instead of just running away. High Admiral Veltar considered this. How many ships do you think will volunteer for what amounts to suicide missions? Before anyone could answer, the command center doors opened again. A group of junior officers entered, humans, Alterians, Krogoth and Nixari. They were led by Commander Lee Haijin, a young human engineer, and included several aliens Deho didn't recognize. Excuse me, Admiral, Commander Lee said, saluting. We heard about the volunteer task force. We'd like to sign up. Behind her, more officers nodded agreement. Deho was surprised to see aliens among them. Why? High Admiral Veltar asked them directly. An Alterian navigator named Lyra spoke up. Because running away hasn't worked. At least with the humans, we have a chance to fight back. A massive Krogoth warrior called Mosh added, humans showed courage against impossible odds. Krogoth, respect courage above all else. The Nexari representative, designated Node 7742, clicked mechanically. Human tactics present new variables for analysis. This unit finds the challenge intriguing. Admiral Park smiled slightly. It looks like you'll have your task force, Captain. Hi. Admiral Veltar remained skeptical. Very well. We will allow this experiment. But understand, Captain Lee, if your methods fail, the Coalition will have no choice but to implement full evacuation protocols. I understand, Deho said. You will have access to our shipyards and supply bases, War Chief Krog added. But the moment your casualties become unsustainable, this program ends. Agreed, Deho replied. As the alien commanders filed out, Admiral Park remained behind with Deho and his core crew. Captain, you just volunteered to test whether human insanity can save the galaxy, Park said quietly. Yes, sir. Any regrets? Deho looked at the tactical display, now showing projections for his new task force. Ships were already being assigned, a mix of human vessels and alien volunteers. It wasn't a large force, but it was a start. Ask. Me again after our first engagement, he said. Commander So Young stepped beside him. Whatever happens, sir, we're with you. Dr. Yoon packed up her research materials. I'll start developing psychological profiles of void collective behavior patterns. If we're going to be unpredictable, we need to understand how they think. Lieutenant Hyunwoo grinned with nervous excitement. Task Force. What should we call ourselves, Captain? Deho thought for a moment, looking out at the stars through the command center's massive windows. Task Force Taeguk, he said finally. After the Korean symbol? So Young asked. Balance through opposition, Deho explained. Order and chaos, working together. It seems appropriate. As his crew began preparing for their new mission, Deho remained at the tactical display. The red markers showing void collective attacks seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The heartbeat of a dying galaxy. But now, for the first time since the enemy's return, there was also hope. Task Force Taeguk gathered at the remote Sigma station, a military outpost on the edge of Coalition space. Captain Lee Dae-ho stood in the station's main hangar, watching, as ships from different species docked alongside each other. Human destroyers sat next to sleek Alterian cruisers, while massive Krogoth battleships dwarfed smaller Nexari science vessels. Commander Kim So-young approached with a data pad. Final roster, sir. 43 ships, mixed crews totaling 8,000 volunteers. Dae-ho studied the numbers. It wasn't a large force by coalition standards, but every person here had chosen to follow human tactics into battle. Any second. Thoughts from the volunteers, he asked. A few, So-young admitted, but more keep arriving. Word is spreading that we actually damaged a void collective ship. Lieutenant Choi Hyun-woo jogged up to them, his face flushed with excitement. Captain, the new crew members are incredible. Navigator Lyra has been studying human naval battles for the past week. She says Alterian precision combined with human unpredictability could create perfect strike patterns. Dae-ho smiled at his young tactical officer's enthusiasm. What about the others? Krog Thane Mosh brought 30 of his best warriors, Hyun-woo continued. They want to learn what he calls honorable madness. And Node 7742 has been calculating probability matrices for seemingly impossible maneuvers. Dr. Yoon Ji-hae joined the group, carrying her usual stack of research materials. Captain, I've completed my analysis of void collective behavior patterns. They rely heavily on predictive algorithms. The more chaotic our actions, the less effectively they can adapt. Show me, Dae-ho said. They moved to a nearby planning room where Dr. Yoon activated a holographic display. It showed the structure of a void collective ship, part machine, part organism. Their hulls adapt by analyzing incoming threats and modifying defensive systems accordingly, she explained. But the process takes time, approximately 2.7 seconds for minor adaptations, up to 15 seconds for major changes. So we need to hit them with multiple different attacks faster than they can adapt, Dae-ho said. Exactly. But here's the interesting part. Their adaptation system becomes less efficient when processing random or contradictory data. Engineer. Lee Hae-jin entered the room, wiping grease from her hands. Captain, I've been working on modifications to our weapon systems based on Dr. Yoon's research. If we can create chaos in our own attack patterns, we might overload their adaptation systems. Dae-ho nodded thoughtfully. This was exactly the kind of innovative thinking he needed. All right, he said. Let's put it to the test. 2 hours later, Task Force Taeguk was in formation near an asteroid field, where long-range sensors had detected void collective activity. 3 enemy ships were harvesting resources from a destroyed coalition mining station. Dae-ho sat in the captain's chair of his new flagship, the Busan's Resolve. The bridge was a mix of species, So Young at his side, Hyun-woo at tactical, Navigator Lyra at the helm, and Node 7742 interfacing with the ship's computers. All ships report ready, Captain, So Young announced. Remember, Daeho said into the communication system, this isn't about winning through superior firepower. We're going to win by being impossible to predict. He turned to Hyunwoo. Begin Operation Typhoon. The task force split into seemingly random groups. Some ships accelerated straight at the enemy, others curved away in wide arcs, and a few simply stopped and began spinning in place. To outside observers, it looked like complete chaos. The Void Collective ships immediately began adapting their defenses, but they couldn't determine which threat to prioritize. Their hulls shifted and changed, trying to protect against attacks from multiple directions. Now, Daeho ordered. The spinning ships suddenly launched guided missiles in all directions. The direct approach group fired their main weapons while executing wild, evasive maneuvers. The arc-flying ships came at the enemy from unexpected angles. Navigator Lyra's voice was steady as she reported, enemy adaptation systems showing stress patterns. They cannot keep up with our attack variations. One Void Collective ship took heavy damage as its hull failed to adapt quickly enough. But the other two were learning, beginning to ignore some attacks to focus on others. Phase 2, Daeho announced. Mosh, you're up. The Krogoth battleship Honor's Edge suddenly broke formation and charged directly at the largest enemy vessel. To everyone watching, it looked like a classic Krogoth berserker attack. Exactly the kind of predictable move the enemy could easily counter. But as the Void Collective ship focused its defenses forward, 3 human destroyers dropped out of hyperspace behind it. They had jumped away minutes earlier, calculated a micro-jump and returned at the perfect moment. The rear attack caught the enemy completely unprepared. Its adaptation system was still focused on the Krogoth ship when human weapons tore into its unprotected stern. Beautiful! Hyunwoo shouted as the enemy ship began venting atmosphere. The remaining Void Collective vessel attempted to retreat, but Node 7742 had predicted its escape vector. Nexari ships were waiting in hyperspace, forcing the enemy back into normal space where human and alien weapons finished it off. In less than 10 minutes, Task Force Taeguk had destroyed 3 Void Collective ships with minimal losses. Back at Sigma Station, the task force celebrated their first major victory. But Daeho found himself in the station's planning room with his senior officers, studying battle recordings. It worked better than I hoped, he admitted. But look at this. He highlighted several moments in the battle recording where the enemy ships had begun to adapt more quickly than expected. They're learning from each engagement, Dr. Yoon observed. Their algorithms are updating in real time. Engineer Lee frowned at the data. If they keep adapting at this rate, our tactics will become predictable within a few battles. Krog Thane, Mosh, who had been invited to the senior staff meeting, spoke in his rumbling voice. Then we must become more unpredictable. How? Navigator Lyra asked. We cannot simply increase chaos without losing all tactical coordination. Node 7742's electronic voice clicked thoughtfully. Perhaps the solution is not to increase chaos, but to make chaos itself unpredictable. Everyone looked at the Nexari. Officer in confusion. Explain, Daeho said. Human tactics rely on controlled chaos, apparent randomness with hidden patterns. But if we create multiple levels of hidden patterns, the enemy will struggle to identify which pattern matters. Daeho began to understand. Layers of deception. Make them think they've figured out our strategy, then reveal it was misdirection. Precisely, Node 7742 replied. We give them false patterns to analyze while executing completely different strategies. Over the following weeks, Task Force Taeguk refined these tactics through a series of engagements. They attacked supply convoys, raided harvesting operations, and struck at isolated Void Collective ships. Each battle was different. Each victory built on misdirection and impossible maneuvers. The word spread through coalition space. Human tactics were working. Volunteers began arriving daily, not just from other species, but humans who had heard about the youngest captain making a difference. But success came with a price. After their 7th major engagement, Daeho stood in the station's medical bay looking at the casualty reports. 43 crew members killed, over 100 wounded. These weren't faceless statistics. These were people who had trusted him with their lives. Commander So Young found him there, staring at the list of names. "Sir," she said quietly. They knew the risks. Every one of them volunteered. "I know," Deho replied, "but knowing doesn't make it easier." Dr. Yoon approached with her latest research. "Captain, I have good news and bad news." "Bad news first," Deho said. "The Void Collective is adapting faster than we hoped. Their central intelligence network is sharing data from our battles across their entire fleet. Soon, every enemy ship will know our tactics. And the good news?" Dr. Yoon smiled slightly. "I think I know how to turn their strength against them. But it will require us to take an enormous risk." Engineer Lee joined the conversation. "What kind of risk?" "We need to get close enough to one of their major installations to plant a virus in their network," Dr. Yoon explained. "Not a computer virus, a information virus. False tactical data that will make them prepare for the wrong kind of attacks." Deho considered this. It would mean penetrating deep into enemy territory, facing odds that would make their previous battles look easy. "How close would we need to get?" he asked. "Very close," Dr. Yoon admitted. "Within their main communication range, probably close enough that most of us wouldn't make it back." The room fell silent. Finally, So-young spoke. "Sir, request permission to begin planning the mission." Deho looked at each of his officers, the people who had followed him from their first desperate encounter to this moment of impossible success. "You understand what we're discussing?" he asked. "This isn't just dangerous. It's almost certainly a one-way trip." Lieutenant Hyunwoo stepped forward. "Captain, when I joined Task Force Taeguk, I knew I might not survive. But I also knew I'd rather die fighting than live running away." Navigator Lyra nodded agreement. "The Alterians have a saying, better to burn bright than fade slow." Krogthane Mosh's scarred face broke into a fierce grin. "Glorious battle or glorious death. Either way." The Coalition Command Center on Altair Prime buzzed with tension. High Admiral Veltar stood before a massive holographic display, showing the latest casualty reports, her silver features tight with concern. War Chief Krog paced behind her, his massive frame casting shadows across the room. "Unacceptable," Veltar said sharply. "Task Force Taeguk has suffered 40% casualties in their last 3 engagements. This human madness has gone too far." Admiral Park Min-soo entered the command center with Commander Bae Tae-jun at his side. Park looked older than his years, the stress of the war showing in the lines around his eyes. "The task force has also destroyed 17 Void Collective ships," Park pointed out. "Their kill ratio is better than any other unit in the fleet." "At what cost?" War Chief Krog rumbled. "Honor demands courage, but this is not courage. It is waste of life." Nexus Prime 001 clicked mechanically as it processed data streams. Analysis confirms. Task Force Taeguk tactics show effectiveness, but sustainability remains questionable. High Admiral Veltar activated new sections of the display. "We have reports from across Coalition space. Captain Lee's methods are spreading to other units. Young officers are attempting similar maneuvers without proper training or understanding. Yesterday, the cruiser Harmony's Dream was lost attempting what they called human-style tactics." Park winced. The Harmony's Dream had been crewed entirely by Alterians. Over 800 lives lost in a single failed engagement. "Perhaps," Veltar continued, "it is time to end this experiment before it destroys what remains of our fleet." Before Park could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. A junior officer ran to Veltar's side. "Admiral, urgent message from Task Force Taeguk. They're requesting immediate reinforcements." The main display shifted to show Captain Lee Deho's face. He looked tired with a fresh bandage on his forehead, but his eyes were still determined. "Coalition Command," Deho said. "We've discovered a major Void Collective staging area in the Kepler Nebula. 3 harvester ships and what appears to be a command vessel. This could be our chance to deal a serious blow to their operations." High Admiral Veltar leaned forward. "Captain, our long-range sensors show nothing in that sector. They're using the nebula's energy emissions to mask their signatures," Deho explained. "We only detected them because we were running silent operations. Sir, if we can hit this staging area, we could disrupt their coordination across this entire sector." War Chief Krog stopped pacing. How many ships do you need? None, Deho said, surprising everyone. Task Force Teguk can handle this alone. We just need permission to engage. Veltar's expression hardened. Captain, your force is already below operational strength. Attacking a major installation with damaged ships and wounded crews is beyond reckless. It's necessary, Deho replied, firmly. Our intelligence shows the enemy is adapting to our tactics faster than expected. This might be our last chance to use the element of surprise. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in heated discussion. Park noticed that Veltar had already made her decision. I'm ordering Task Force Teguk to stand down, she announced. They will return to base for rest and refit. Admiral, Park began, but Veltar cut him off. This is not a debate, Admiral Park. That young captain has let success go to his head. His next mistake will cost thousands of lives. Meanwhile, in the Kepler Nebula, Task Force Teguk had already begun their assault. Deho stood on the bridge of the Busan's Resolve, watching his reduced fleet maneuver through the colorful gas clouds that hid the enemy installation. Sensors are having trouble with the interference, Navigator Lyra reported, but Node 7742 has identified the most probable locations for enemy vessels. Commander Kim So-young looked concerned as she studied the tactical display. Sir, we're going in nearly blind. If there are more ships than we detected, then we adapt, Deho said simply. That's what we do. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai looked up from her science station. Captain, I'm reading some unusual energy patterns from the command vessel. It's not just coordinating local forces. It appears to be connected to the broader Void Collective network. Engineer Lee Hee-jin's eyes lit up with understanding. Sir, if Dr. Yoon is right, that ship might contain the network access we need for her information virus. Deho felt a surge of hope and fear. This could be the opportunity they had been waiting for, but it also meant getting dangerously close to the most heavily defended enemy vessel they had ever encountered. All ships, this is Teguk Leader, he announced over the comm. Target priorities have changed. We're going after the command vessel. The response from his mixed crew was immediate and unanimous. They were ready. The battle that followed was unlike anything Task Force Teguk had attempted before. The nebula's energy interfered with sensors and communications, turning the fight into a chaotic melee where ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts in the colored clouds. Lieutenant Choi Hyun-woo coordinated attacks from multiple directions, using the nebula itself as cover. Krug Thane-Mash led his warriors in direct assault runs that drew enemy fire away from more vulnerable ships. The Alterian vessels used their superior sensors to guide human ships through the worst of the interference. But the enemy was learning. The Void Collective ships adapted to each new tactic within minutes, their hulls shifting to counter-specific weapon types and maneuver patterns. They're getting better at predicting us, So-young observed as another attack run failed to achieve full effectiveness. Then we stop being predictable, Deho decided. All ships execute Plan Chaos. Plan Chaos wasn't really a plan at all. It was the abandonment of all tactical coordination in favor of pure improvisation. Each ship captain was given complete freedom to attack however they chose, whenever they chose. The result was beautiful madness. Ships attacked from impossible angles, retreated without warning, regrouped in random formations, and struck again before the enemy could adapt. The Void Collective's prediction algorithms couldn't cope with truly random behavior. In the confusion, Dr. Yoon and Engineer Lee managed to get close enough to the command vessel to plant their information virus. But as they were extracting, the enemy launched a massive counterattack. The Soul's Light, one of their human destroyers, took critical damage while covering the retreat. Captain Nam Yoon-ho, a veteran officer who had joined Task Force Teguk, after hearing about their successes, made the ultimate sacrifice. All ships, this is Soul's Light. Nam's voice came over the comm, calm despite the explosions in the background. My engines are gone, but weapons are still online. I'm going to give you some cover. Captain Nam, abandon ship, Deho ordered. We can pick up your crew. Negative, sir. Someone needs to keep these bastards busy while you escape. Tell my family. Nam's transmission cut off as his ship rammed the damaged command vessel, both vessels disappearing in a brilliant explosion. The surviving Task Force Taeguk ships made it back to Coalition space, but the victory felt hollow. They had dealt a serious blow to enemy operations and successfully planted Dr. Yoon's virus, but the cost kept getting higher. When they docked at Sigma Station, Daeho was met by Admiral Park and a contingent of Coalition officials. Their expressions were not welcoming. "Captain Lee Daeho," High Admiral Veltar said formally, "you are hereby relieved of command pending a full inquiry into your conduct." Daeho felt the world shift beneath his feet. "Admiral, you disobeyed direct orders to stand down," Veltar continued. "Your reckless tactics have resulted in unnecessary casualties. This madness ends now." The gathered crowd of Task Force Taeguk personnel grew restless. Navigator Lyra stepped forward, her ulterior features tight with anger. "With respect, Admiral, Captain Lee's madness is the only thing that has worked against the Void Collective." Krog Thane, Mosha's deep voice rumbled agreement. "The young human leads with honor. His warriors follow willingly." High Admiral Veltar's silver eyes flashed. "Captain Nam Yunho is dead because of Captain Lee's orders. How many more must die for human pride?" The words hit Daeho like a physical blow. Nam had been a good captain, a father of 3, a man who had trusted Daeho's leadership. Now he was gone. "Admiral Veltar is right," Daeho said quietly. "Surprising. Everyone. I am responsible for every life lost under my command." But Commander So Young stepped beside him. "And you're also responsible for every life saved. Sir, without Task Force Taeguk, the Void Collective would have harvested 3 more sectors by now." Dr. Yoon looked up from her datapad. "Admiral, if I may, the virus we planted is already showing results. Enemy coordination in this sector has dropped by 60%. Engineer Lee nodded enthusiastically. "The tactical data we gathered will help design new weapons specifically to counter Void Collective adaptation systems." High Admiral Veltar remained unmoved. "These achievements do not justify the methods. Captain Lee, you will return to Coalition. Command for debriefing. Task Force Taeguk is disbanded." As Coalition security officers moved to escort Daeho away, Lieutenant Hyunwoo called out, "Sir, what are your orders?" Daeho looked back at the young officer, at his loyal crew, at the aliens who had learned to fight like humans. These people had followed him into impossible battles and achieved the impossible. "Follow proper chain of command," he said simply. "And remember, sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose." As he was led away, Daeho could hear his crew argue. The escape pod drifted silently through the Void Collective's territory, its emergency power systems running on minimal settings to avoid detection. Captain Lee Daeho floated in the cramped space alongside the survivors of his crew, Commander Kim So-young, Dr. Yoon Ji-hae, Engineer Lee Hae-jin, and Sergeant Park Sang-min, their Marine commander. It had been 3 days since their ship was destroyed during what was supposed to be a routine prisoner transfer. The Coalition Tribunal had found Daeho guilty of disobeying orders, but before his sentence could be carried out, Void Collective forces had attacked the transport convoy. In the chaos, his loyal crew had broken him out and stolen an escape. Now they were deeper in enemy space than any Coalition force had ever been. "Life support is holding," Engineer Lee reported quietly. "But we have maybe 2 days of air left." Dr. Yoon looked up from a damaged scanner she had been trying to repair. "I'm picking up massive energy readings ahead. Something big." Daeho moved to the small viewing port. Through the darkness of space, he could see it, a structure so vast it defied imagination. It looked like a mechanical spider web stretching across several star systems, with a massive black hole at its center. Energy streams flowed along the web-like structures, pulsing with alien intelligence. "What is that thing?" Sergeant Park whispered. "The Nexus," So Young said, her face pale. "It has to be the central command structure for the entire Void Collective." Dr. Yoon's scanner finally came online, and her expression changed from curiosity to horror. "Captain, I'm reading millions of consciousness patterns, maybe billions. They're not just destroying organic life. They're storing it. Deho felt a chill run down his spine. The Void Collective wasn't just conquering the galaxy. They were preserving every mind they encountered, trapping consciousness in digital prison. "Can you get us closer without being detected?" he asked Engineer Lee. "Maybe. But why would we want to? That thing probably has more firepower than the entire Coalition fleet." Before Deho could answer, their communication system crackled to life with a weak signal. The voice that emerged was definitely human, but aged and tired. "Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Chen Wei of the battleship Terra's Hope. If you can hear this, please respond." The crew exchanged shocked looks. The Terra's Hope had been lost over 2 years ago during one of the first Void Collective attacks. "This is Captain Lee Deho," he responded carefully. "Admiral Chen, we thought you were dead." A bitter laugh came through the comm. "Dead would be easier, Captain. My crew and I have been prisoners in this place for 23 months. We're part of their collection now." Dr. Yoon leaned toward the communication unit. "Admiral, this is Dr. Yoon Ji-hai. Can you explain what you mean by collection?" "The Void Collective doesn't just destroy civilizations, Doctor. They preserve them. Every mind they encounter gets stored in their central matrix. We're all still alive in here, but we're trapped in a digital recreation of our worst fears." Engineer Lee was working frantically at her station. "Captain, I'm detecting the transmission source. It's coming from inside the Nexus structure itself." "Admiral Chen," Deho said, "is there any way to disrupt their system from the inside?" Another voice joined the conversation. This one clearly alien, with the melodic tones of an Alterian. "Captain Lee, this is High Commander Shalvin. I have been trapped here for 3 years. The Collective's control system is vulnerable, but only during the consciousness transfer process." More voices began joining the conversation. Krogoth warriors, Nexari scientists, even species that Deho didn't recognize. All of them trapped minds that had somehow maintained enough individual identity to resist complete assimilation. "How many of you are there?" Sergeant Park asked. "Thousands," Admiral Chen replied. "Maybe tens of thousands. We've been planning a rebellion for months, but we needed someone from the outside to help trigger it." Dr. Yoon was studying the scanner readings intently. "Captain, I think I understand now. The Void Collective isn't purely machine intelligence. It's a hybrid system that incorporates organic consciousness. That's why they can adapt so quickly to new tactics. And that's their weakness," Deho realized. "The organic components can rebel." Engineer Lee looked up from her controls. "Sir, I can get us to the outer structure, but once we're inside, there's no guarantee we can get back out." Deho looked at each of his crew members. They had already sacrificed everything to follow him this far. Now he was asking them to risk their very souls. "I won't order anyone to come with me," he said quietly. "This is beyond duty or military obligation." Commander So Young smiled grimly. "Sir, we didn't break you out of Coalition custody just to abandon you now." Dr. Yoon nodded agreement. "Besides, this might be our only chance to understand how the Collective really works." Engineer Lee was already plotting their approach vector. "If we're doing this, we need to move fast. My scans show increased activity around the Nexus. They might be preparing for another major attack on Coalition space." Sergeant Park checked his weapon systems. "Ma'am, with respect, what exactly are we hoping to accomplish? Even if we can cause some disruption, we're still just 5 people against a galaxy-spanning intelligence." It was a fair question. Deho looked out at the massive structure ahead of them, trying to imagine the billions of trapped minds within its digital maze. "We're going to give them hope," he said finally. "Every successful rebellion in human history started with someone refusing to accept the impossible." As their escape pod approached the Nexus, more voices joined their communication channel. Admiral Chen began coordinating with trapped commanders from dozens of species, sharing intelligence about the Collective's internal structure. "The central processing core is located near the black hole," explained a Nexari consciousness called Node Alpha Prime. "But reaching it requires passing through 7 layers of defensive systems." "Defensive systems designed to keep people out," added High Commander Shalavan. not to keep consciousness in. Dr. Yoon was scanning the approaching structure with growing excitement. Captain, I'm detecting harmonic resonance patterns in their quantum processing systems. If we can introduce the right frequency disruption, we could cause a cascade. Failure throughout the network. Engineer Lee finished, understanding immediately. The escape pod passed through the first layer of the nexus structure, into a tunnel that pulsed with organic-looking walls. The sensation was deeply unsettling, like being swallowed by some massive creature. Welcome to our nightmare, Admiral Chen's voice said. The collective will try to interface with your minds as soon as you enter the processing areas. Don't fight it completely. You need to maintain enough connection to communicate with us. What happens if we resist too much? Commander So Young asked. A new voice answered. Ancient and tired, but still recognizably human. This is Commander Zhang Li of the exploration vessel New Beijing. I've been here for 8 years. If you resist completely, you become isolated. Cut off from the network, but also unable to help anyone else. Daeho felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him. How many civilizations had the collective preserved over the millennia? How many brilliant minds were trapped in this digital prison? Zhang Li, he said. What do you know about the consciousness transfer process Admiral Chen mentioned? Every few hours, the collective processes new minds, Zhang explained. During the transfer, their control protocols are reduced to prevent interference with the integration process. That's when we have the most freedom to act. Engineer Lee was monitoring their approach to the processing center. Captain, we're about to enter the interface zone. Once we're connected to their network, there's no going back. Daeho took a deep breath, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. His command of the youngest captain in fleet history, the development of human tactics against impossible odds, the loyalty of crews willing to follow him into certain death. All right, he said. Let's go save some minds. The escape pod passed through the final barrier, and suddenly the universe exploded into digital sensation. Daeho felt his consciousness being pulled into a vast network of thoughts, memories, and experiences. For a terrifying moment, he thought, he would be lost forever in the chaos of billions of minds. But then he heard familiar voices. So Young, Dr. Yoon, Engineer Lee, Sergeant Park, all maintaining their individual identity while connected to something unimaginably vast. And in that network, he sensed something the Void Collective had never expected. Rebellion. Not just from recent captives, but from consciousness that had been trapped for centuries, all waiting for the right moment to fight back. The youngest captain in Coalition history was about to lead the greatest prison break in galactic history. And the weapon he would use wasn't superior technology or brilliant tactics. It was the one thing the collective could never understand or predict. The refusal to give up hope. The digital landscape of the Void Collective's central matrix was unlike anything Captain Lee Daeho had ever experienced. His consciousness floated through streams of data that looked like rivers of light, connecting billions of trapped minds across impossibly vast digital spaces. Stay close, Admiral Chen's voice echoed through the network. The collective's security systems are hunting for us. Daeho could sense his crew nearby in the digital realm. Commander So Young appeared as a steady blue light, Dr. Yoon as a pulse of scientific curiosity, Engineer Lee as a web of technical connections, and Sergeant Park as a solid protective presence. This is incredible. Dr. Yoon's voice carried wonder despite their danger. Captain, I can see the entire structure of their consciousness storage system. There are minds here from species that went extinct thousands of years ago. Focus, Doctor, Daeho replied. We need to find the central processing core. A new presence joined their group, ancient and powerful but somehow familiar. When it spoke, Daeho recognized something that shocked him. You are the young human captain who has been causing such chaos, the presence said with amusement. I am ancient Commander HFY of the Alterian Deep Fleet. I have been waiting 10,000 years for someone like you. 10,000 years? Engineer Lee asked in amazement. The collective's first harvest, HFY explained. We were exploring the galactic rim when they found us. Our entire civilization was absorbed in a matter of days. But we have not been idle in our captivity. The ancient commander's presence guided them through the digital maze, showing them pathways that avoided the collective's security algorithms. As they moved deeper into the system, more consciousness joined their rebellion. Not just recent captives, but minds that had been trapped since the beginning of the collective's existence. "Here," HFY announced as they approached a massive structure that looked like a crystalline mountain made of pure thought. The Core Processing Center. This is where new minds are integrated and where the collective makes decisions about resource allocation. Dr. Yoon's consciousness pulsed with excitement. "Captain, I can see the harmonic resonance patterns I detected earlier. The entire system operates on quantum entanglement frequencies. If we can disrupt those frequencies, we can free everyone." Daeho finished. But as they approached the core, they encountered the collective's final defense, an avatar created from the combined consciousness of every absorbed species, including recent human captives. The avatar appeared as a shifting form that contained elements of every race the collective had ever encountered. "You will not interfere with the preservation protocol," the avatar said, its voice a mixture of every language and species. "We are saving you from the chaos of individual existence." The avatar attacked, not with weapons, but with the full force of combined tactical knowledge from every military mind the collective had ever absorbed. It fought with Altarian precision, Krogoth fury, Nixari calculation, and human unpredictability, all at once. Daeho and his team were overwhelmed. The avatar knew every move they might make, every tactic they had ever used, because it contained the consciousness of everyone who had ever fought the collective. "We cannot defeat it through combat," Commander So Young observed as they retreated through the digital landscape. "Then we don't fight it," Daeho said, understanding flooding through him. "We convince it." He turned to face the avatar, opening his consciousness completely. "You say you're preserving us? But what about choice? What about the right to decide? Our own fate?" "Individual choice leads to chaos and destruction," the avatar replied. "We have seen it across 10,000 years of galactic history." "Yes," Daeho agreed. "Choice can lead to destruction, but it can also lead to something beautiful, to sacrifice for others, to love, to hope for something better." The avatar paused, confusion rippling through its combined consciousness. Dr. Yoon moved closer. "You have the memories of billions of beings. Don't you also have their capacity for love? For hope?" "Love is inefficient," the avatar said, but its voice was less certain. Engineer Lee's consciousness blazed with determination. "Inefficient, maybe, but it's also what makes life worth living." Ancient Commander HFY's presence joined them. "Young Captain, the collective contains not just recent minds, but the consciousness of its original creators, a species that built this system to preserve themselves during a galactic catastrophe. They never intended for it to become a prison." The avatar's form began to shift and change as internal conflict tore through its combined consciousness. The human minds within, it began to assert their individuality, remembering what it meant to choose sacrifice over safety. We remember." Voices began to emerge from the avatar. Human voices, alien voices, all speaking in their own languages, but with the same message. "We remember choosing to fight even when we couldn't win. We remember choosing to die for others, rather than live for ourselves." The avatar's form began to fragment as billions of individual consciousness reasserted their identity within the collective matrix. "Now," Dr. Yoon called out, "while their control systems are destabilized," Engineer Lee reached into the core processing center and began introducing harmonic disruptions into the quantum entanglement network. The frequencies spread like wildfire through the entire nexus structure, carrying a simple message to every trapped consciousness: you have a choice. The result was the greatest liberation in galactic history. Across the vast nexus, billions of minds suddenly remembered what it meant to be free. Some chose to remain in digital form, exploring possibilities that physical existence could never offer. Others chose to return to biological life where possible. Many simply chose to rest after millennia of forced existence. But most importantly, they chose. The Void Collective's ships throughout the galaxy, suddenly stopped their coordinated attacks as their controlling intelligence fragmented into billions of individual decisions. Some ships shut down completely. Others were taken over by the liberated minds within them and began helping evacuation efforts. Meanwhile, outside the Nexus, the Coalition fleet had finally arrived. Admiral Park Min-soo stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching in amazement as Void Collective vessels simply stopped fighting and began broadcasting surrender signals. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving transmissions from Captain Lee. He's alive, and he's inside the enemy command structure." Back in the digital realm, Daeho felt the network around them changing. The prison was becoming something new, a voluntary community of consciousness from across the galaxy, sharing knowledge and experience freely rather than being forced together. "Captain," Commander So-young said, "we did it. We actually did it. We all did it," Daeho corrected, sensing the billions of minds around them who had chosen freedom over security, chaos over control. Ancient Commander Zeph-Hi's presence approached them. "Young Captain, my species has a debt to repay. We will help rebuild what the collective destroyed, and we will teach others what we have learned about the balance between order and freedom." Dr. Yoon was already connecting with other scientific minds in the network, sharing discoveries that would advance galactic civilization by thousands of years. Engineer Lee was working with Nixari consciousness to develop new technologies that would prevent another collective from ever rising. But Daeho found himself drawn to a group of human consciousness, the crews of ships that had been lost in the early days of the war. Among them was Captain Nam Yunho, the officer who had sacrificed himself to save Task Force Teguk. "Captain Nam," Daeho said, "I'm sorry. If I had been a better commander—" "Stop," Nam interrupted with a gentle smile. "You were exactly the commander the galaxy needed. Young enough to try impossible things. Stubborn enough to refuse defeat. Human enough to believe that freedom is worth any price." As the liberation of the Nexus continued, Daeho felt his consciousness being pulled back toward his physical body. The escape pod was being retrieved by Coalition ships, his crew returning to their biological forms after their incredible journey through digital space. 6 months later, Admiral Lee Daeho, the youngest fleet admiral in Coalition history, stood before a gathering of representatives from thousands of species. The Great Assembly Hall on Altair Prime was filled with beings from across the galaxy, including many who existed only in digital form, but participated through holographic projection. "The war against the Void Collective taught us many things," he said to the assembled crowd. "It taught us that diversity of thought is our greatest strength. It taught us that sometimes the youngest voice sees solutions that experience overlooks. Most importantly, it taught us that the freedom to choose our own path is worth fighting for, no matter the odds." In the audience, Commander So-young, now Captain So-young, smiled with pride. Beside her sat Dr. Yoon, who had been appointed head of the new Galactic Consciousness Research Institute. Engineer Lee had become the chief designer for a new class of ships that could interface safely with digital intelligence. Even Sergeant Park had been promoted, now training a new generation of Marines in what had become known as human-style tactics. But the person Daeho was most proud to see was Lieutenant Commander Choi Hyun-woo, who had just returned from his first mission as captain of his own ship, the youngest captain in